Hey, just coming all in, and just a heads up that this is kind of a still kind of figuring out everything sort of stream. So there's going to be a lot of kinks that we're working out and things like that. So yeah, I'm actually kind of warm, so I'm going to take this off because it's a bit warm. So yeah, I have a general idea of like what I want the format of this to be, and that is oops, so sorry about that. Is first up is actually putting on my headset so I can actually hear what you're hearing. Hey, I am Lily Haran. Where are you? There you are. Ooh. Hello? Okay, got this. So, okay. So, yeah. So I figured like the first part of these streams will just kind of like until like the first hour or so, like these I'm aiming to be, I'm not sure how long I want it to be, but I would start them earlier so more people could watch them. I know that this is a quite like late start time, but the main thing is that if it's not at this time, my house is really loud and it's rough and I can't do it then, which is obviously not ideal for that. Also, like, my neighborhood gets quite noisy until like it's actually quite late, so this is the normal time that I will start streaming it at all. So yeah. So I'm just going to be doing a lot of adjusting stuff and like figuring out sound levels and like just like kind of generally testing things live and just generally figuring out how we want all of this to work. Hey there, Hacksaw Hill. How's it going? I actually don't even think that YouTube streaming supports binaural. That said, I think I have the mic in the wrong setup for that. But yeah, just kind of but then the second part of the stream, after we just kind of like a general kind of like so, like I said, a lot of today is going to be, I'm just playing around this dice bag to, figure this out and everything, so, I don't know, I'm just kind of going to be, I don't have a topic for today, like, I'll probably come into these and kind of just do kind of like a general, like, back and forth talk and everything, for like the first hour or so. And then hopping into, and this is how I'm going to be doing the more long form story readings that I do on my channel. Words that mean things. Gotta check a few things here. Yes, okay. Or the second part of the thing after once we probably hit about midnight. We're going to switch over to doing, this is how we're going to do longer books. So I've almost finished up the reading The Hobbit on my channel, and the problem with that I found was that it's just taken so long to get through it, as well as there's some just weirdness that happens with that, and of course these will be, like, what would you speak of? Think of just the general topics that are already on my channel, like, a specific topic about like D&D or magic or just general things in general, or just kind of like live with the chat. So yeah. So but and also in the future this will also be streamed on both Twitch and YouTube. Currently I'm just doing YouTube just as I kind of figure out the kinks and the mechanics of how YouTube works, because I don't want to do both because this is mostly here to be doing for the mechanicals of it. Like, this isn't going to be probably a full-length live stream. It's just going to be figuring everything out and just kind of testing it and things like that. So yeah. Tonight I am drinking just some Earl Grey. But yeah, so I just have some stuff for just kind of like general, actually I'm just gonna go right into shuffling because I enjoy shuffling, and do stuff like that. Why is it so echoey? Okay, that might be a bit much, but yep. Do I have a dream? What do you mean, do I have a dream? Hey there, Jan. How's it going? I mean, I have lots of dreams. Mostly I just want to, like, find a girlfriend and, I don't know. Like, if you're talking, like, my ideal, like, dream situation is find a girlfriend, like, get, like, a small place, like, not, like, in the country, but, like, away, like, just outside of, like, a small town or something, and be together. But, just in general, like, I don't know, goals what to accomplish, but I don't know, I just try to survive day by day. No. Also, if anyone has any specific trigger requests, just let me know. I have a few things with me right here, but I can always add more things on later. Also, let me know how sound levels are and things like that, because YouTube doesn't actually give me that much feedback for things like that, at least. So, yeah. No. But yeah, no, I figured I'd also talk about just kind of like logistics, how I'm gonna probably do that. What deck am I shuffling? I am shuffling my 4-color, oh, that's not true, 4-color humans led by Saskia the Unyielding. So, yeah. It's kind of like, it's like, I don't know, my premier deck. It's the oldest deck I currently have together. I actually only have 2 EDH decks together right now, because I took apart most of them for my cube. Which is this one and Abzan Life Game, but Abzan Life Game's over there. This was just the first one I saw. But yeah, I have done deck techs on it. Actually, one not actually that long ago. But yeah. No, I love this one. And that said, I am considering doing a cutting it down, because it's currently 4-color, which is, it's blueless. But I am considering cutting it down to being, just Celestia. Just because kind of like bringing it back to the kind of the roots of like what the like human tribal is, which is like that like the Innistrad like Selesnya colors. Also just like it was my second deck was Selesnya humans. My second EDH deck, I should say, which was red led by Sigarda, and I kind of want to like pull back to that. Like 4-color humans also just tends to become just like, here's just 4-color good stuff that happen to be humans, which is part of the reality of just playing human tribal in general. But I figured I'd try to switch it up. Why are people driving in the snow? It shouldn't be snowing. It is so snowy outside. It's honestly beautiful, but yeah, no, there's a lot outside, so oh. But yeah, so yeah, also just a little bit more focus on this deck, just because like right now it's kind of like it wants to be an aggro deck, but it doesn't really have the mana base to really be an aggro deck, and cutting it down to 2 colors will also help. Because I also used to have just Naya humans led by Samut, who doesn't really have human synergies and just is general a very good human. Because there are a fair few like red cards that care about humans, but especially from original Innistrad, and notably there are some cards that make human tokens. Okay, notably just Hanweir battlements, but yeah. No, but yeah. You also got these ones have a slightly different sound to them because they're just different sleeves. But yeah, no, I really don't know how this is gonna turn out at all, but I've been wanting to do ASMR streams for a while. But yeah, like I said, this like time slot isn't like the best time slot, and I totally understand that. Alright, well, I'll see you around. Yeah, no, I'm planning on doing this every week, about this time. And although that time might change, but this is the time slot of this is like a time slot of necessity, rather than actually wanting it to be like the actual time slot, but yeah. Because I'd love to do it like be able to like start at like 8 o'clock, which would put me at like starting at like 11 o'clock East Coast. But my house is just very loud at that point, and I don't have control over the other people in my house. Which is like nothing against them. It's like they're awake. That's what's gonna happen. But hey there, your second bike. How's it going? Like I said, if anyone has like any trigger requests, today is kind of just like a test day and figuring out. I pulled some stuff to just work with, but it's a very unfocused day because I'm mostly focusing on the logistics of everything rather than yeah. Oh, I just realized that my backdrop isn't all the way there. There we go. Just want like the back black all the way across, just to not like ruin the illusion of that I'm not just in my room. But I mean, I am trying to go for like a little like cozy look and everything. Oh, it's alright. I'll see you around. Also, this whole live stream will be recorded and kept on the channel if you want to go back and watch it. Hey there, Thunbird. How's it going? Who is my favorite planeswalker? Definitely Tamio. I love Tamio so much. For several reasons. A, she's adorable. B, she loves books. C, she's adorable kids. Not that we've seen their kids, but I can just assume that Moonfolk kids are adorable if they're like smaller Tamios. And also she's Bant, and I mean, of the 3 color combinations, like Bant is the one I identify most with. Yeah. I like my bunny Moomon. What about you? Yep, same. Where are you at? I'm here in Bellevue and across from Seattle, and it's just been like, ugh. I mean, I'm looking forward to like going on like walking like Starbucks tomorrow, if it's even open. Getting like a nice hot chocolate, and when I'm like all bundled up before heading back. Oh. Okay, that's enough shuffling for now, as much as I love shuffling. Yeah, I do like Dominic. Also, I really like Gideon. Gideon gets a lot of hate, but I think he's a really cool character. And like, actually like a lot of really cool depth to this character. And I'm really excited to see where he goes. Especially once like, I don't know, the main part of this like Bolus arc is over. Because War of the Spark, it has been described as the penultimate episode. So we're coming up to like kind of the end of the Bolus arc. So that'll be interesting seeing where it goes. Especially with like the stuff with him and Heliod, which will be cool. Because people have been like hinting that like maybe we might be going back to Theros, because of like the existence of like the heavily costed like heavy mana intensive cards in guilds and Ravnica Allegiance, which ties into devotion quite nicely, and potentially. What are you looking for in terms of card variety with War of the Spark? I don't really know what I'm looking for War of the Spark. War of the Spark is going to be interesting because it's set on Ravnica, but they've said it's not like the other Ravnica sets, so it's not necessarily going to be guild focused, which will be interesting. So, I'm not really sure. I guess the main thing I'm looking for is like I don't even know what I'm looking for. The thing is just we know nothing about it. They've done a good job of like keeping it like hush hush, and like we don't really have any like beginning idea of like what's going on about it. Okay, that's a bit loud. Oops. If you've never tried using any of these Santin Towers, they're great. They're like $10, and they're like one of the best cases you can get. But they also just like feel really nice. Yeah, no, I would love kind of like a Planeswalker heavy set. Like, I understand there are like the logistical problems of like too many Planeswalkers in Standard and things like that. But I would love like a even if it was like a supplemental set where they like print like a bunch of like the like not like some like you can just love like the chase walkers at Mythic, but like having like low value walkers at like or like the $5 walkers at like rare, just like make a high planeswalker for like I don't know masters format, even though they're not making masters anymore. Oh, that'd be interesting, like getting some more, because in terms of color identity, we got that a little bit in Ravnica 2 with the fuse cards, because those gave you three color partings, like Catch and Release was like a Jeskai technically card. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Are we back? Okay, we're back. Yeah, no, my computer just said like, yes, it's now disconnected. But, uh-oh. So, we're back, and we don't have a ROM, so that's good. Yeah. And it would be cool. I expect that probably will be more like a normal set. But yeah, I could also see that where we get like some tricolor stuff because like getting like some Grixis stuff for Boltless and like maybe not like strictly wedges or shards, but like perhaps like I don't know, asymmetrical ones. But yeah, I don't know. Oh, I need to refresh that. My live preview of what's going on is being a bit iffy. No, I don't want to enable the whole thing. Okay, cool. Oh, I wonder if the storm might be causing us problems. Alright, well, let me know if, like, there might be an issue, but yeah. But, you know, I am excited to see what we get from Wordless Park. Like, I haven't been able to play Allegiance as much as I have wanted to yet. Like, I haven't gone out and drafted it that much. But, I'm excited for Wordless Park. It's a, like, I like Allegiance, like, in terms of, like, I love just, like, Allegiance for all its commander goodies. So great. I guess I won't be able to, like, I won't be able to draft this, weekend because, I am very much snowed in. Mock said they were closed tonight, but, they said they're gonna try to be open tomorrow, but I don't know what the wisdom, if that's that wise, because it's hard to get anywhere right now. So I just find it funny because it's like I follow a bunch of like Wizards people on Twitter and everything, but since they're all like located near me in the Seattle area, it's just my Twitter feed is just filled with like people from Wizards like talking about the snow and whatnot. Yeah. This one I look at like this is just my pre-release pack from all the way back from Guilds because I chose this one over my like Allegiance one because it's Selesnya and the Selesnya are the best. But I don't know how the sound will pick up on the mic, but it has a really nice sound. At least I think so. I don't know why I'm moving it around. It's just because I don't think this actually supports binaural sounds. Which is unfortunate. I really hope Twitch and YouTube eventually like allow for binaural sounds. Like, I understand it wasn't super important. This isn't doing it for me. So I'm gonna move back to dice for a little bit. What guild do you think came out as weakest after release of are we talking about limited? Yeah, no, Azorius still feels the weakest. Like, Azorius isn't as weak as I thought it would be, but yeah, no, it's just, you have to get the exact right cards. Like, there is, like, a decent Azorius deck there, but it's just, it has to be just right, in my opinion. That said, I have not drafted it quite enough to really be, I'm not an expert on limited format, just because I just haven't gotten a chance to, because I've been really busy with everything. And I've been like, I got sick like last weekend, and things been crazy, and just, it's been rough. Oh. No. But yeah. So, yeah, for future streams, I'll probably have like a set topic that I'm going to be talking about, and actually have like a routine ready to go. And I'll figure other things out, and like this is, like I keep saying, like this is mostly for figuring out logistics of everything. Yeah, addendum, it just, I like addendum as a mechanic. I think it's really cool, like flexible use of things, but it also just doesn't feel like there's enough addendum cards. Like there aren't that many of them, which I guess like, yeah, because you only put addendum on instance and only instance, which limits where you can put them. But at the same time, it's just there's not enough of them, and just all together Azoria stuff just doesn't seem to have as strong of a mechanical identity. Hey there, Chad. How's it going? Well, I mean, this is the first time I'm going live on YouTube. I've done Twitch streams, although I've been pretty inconsistent about them. Although I'll be starting to do those on a weekly basis on Wednesdays at noon Pacific. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that there was that small of a variance between the two. Oh, it's cool data. This, if you're wondering, is my dice bag. My grandmother made this bag for me, and it was like, this is perfect to store all of my dice. Okay, not all my dice. All my dice does not fit in here. It stores a fair amount of dice. What are you? Are you a Selesnya dice? No, you're a Gruul dice. Gross. Why are you Selesnya colors if you're Gruul dice? Come on, close up. There we go. Yeah. But no, I don't want to like get an actual like good like set for all this. Like right now I just have the black background. I want to get some other things that I can hang to like give it, I don't know, a little bit of a cozier feel as we're here. Especially in about like half an hour or so, I'm going to be switching into, we're going to be doing some reading, and because that's kind of how I'm going to be doing books going forward. Like my reading videos will be more focused on short stories and stuff as I'm finishing up Hobbit. Most girl streamers do the same thing. Oh, like, I know what you're talking about. I know, I'll have to figure it out. I have to figure out something that just works for me and works my feel. I just like, I don't know, I have my bed here, it's cozy. I have it so I can, sit back if I need to, and, just like make it more, relaxed and everything. Although I have to change like where the arm is positioned because that arm is kind of ugly there. But yeah, I'll figure something out. I might also just switch back to the arm being overhead and where my mic, you just can't see the mic. So yeah, no, dark purple actually would look good, especially with like this black here. The thing is, I mean, if I'm gonna break the illusion a little bit, but I have this like thing up top, which I was thinking I could have like different like colored like drapes and stuff like coming down and giving some extra textures and things. But I could mount some lights there, I guess. So yeah, peel back the curtain of the setup. But I'm currently in the midst of, my entire room is in the midst of kind of like a reorganization, so I'll actually have like multiple shooting angles that I can actually shoot from, so that'll be exciting. Yeah, but the book I'm starting out first for these streams, and this is actually like 5 books because it's like the entire series. Actually, I think it's missing 1 book, but it's my favorite book of all time. We'll be starting out with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I've been doing fantasy, and we're going to switch over to some sci-fi, because this book is amazing, and I love it, but we're not going to be starting that for a little bit. Because I was thinking about, like, we'll do an hour of kind of just, like, hangout discussion, and that was my thing, and then at midnight, we switch over, midnight my time, we switch over to just settling down, calming down. I'll refill my tea if I need to, and we read a book. I think I also might just like do a tea nook actually over here, so I can like refill my tea on camera without actually having to like leave here. But yeah, no, yeah, no, just kind of figuring things out, and like I have an idea of kind of like what I want this to be, kind of this kind of like, hey, it's the end of the week, let's like wind down, let's sit down, like after you come back from all your like, I don't know, Friday night partying or whatever, let's just like have a nice discussion, let's talk and hang out. I'll grab just random things that I know that like just some nice like passive triggers while we have a nice conversation, and then finish off with just some reading of what we're ever doing. This keeps falling out. Let's actually put the strap on so it's actually will stay closed without me having to try. Will they always be at this time? For the moment, yes. I know it's a bit late, but I can't start really any earlier than that because otherwise my house is very loud because the rest of my family's around and I can't control when they go to bed, and I'm not going to tell them, be like, no, you cannot speak. I have internet people to talk to. But yeah, there may be times where when they're like out of town or whatnot, I might like start earlier, but it'll be extended streams that start earlier. But for the most part, unfortunately, I do have to do them at this time. And someone is messaging me. Sorry about that. I did not mute my phone. Okay, just a friend talking about D&D stuff. I don't need to know that. But yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, just kind of figuring this out and getting good things. And of course, all these will be recorded. I think YouTube records them automatically, but I'm also recording them locally if I want to, like, polish them at all. But, yeah. But also, any feedback that you have would be really helpful. Like, if you notice, like, sound levels are wrong, if you, like, have, like, any idea of, like, any extra content or anything. I don't know. I have the idea of kind of like this being kind of like an evening show type thing where like I have different like segments that I plug in, where it's like I might find that like just an hour of talking discussion is like too long, and I might want to like break it up and actually have like set in things. But yeah. So yeah. Also, currently, I'm just doing this on YouTube. I've said this several times before, but in the future, it will also be on Twitch at the same time. I need to figure out where I'm gonna like coordinate like on the recordings, if I want to have like Twitch chat like on the actual video, and then YouTube chat. Because I know if you go with the native recording that YouTube does of this, it will put up the chat alongside with it, which is obviously beneficial and nice and awesome. But words that mean things. And won't have the Twitch chat on there, so I might also have there might be like a live Twitch thing, and I'll coordinate the two chats and whatnot. And I know the stream tool that does will also, like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. But yeah, no, in terms of just like the scene itself, like this scene that I'm in right now, which is just a camera feed, I don't need anything more complicated than that for something like this. It's not like when I'm streaming gamings on Twitch where I like want like subscriber notifications and things like that, because those will just end up being loud and whatnot. Like obviously I do like it when you do subscribe and things like that, but they won't be notifications on the screen. I'll just get those from the chat and reply to them then, rather than the whole big whatever the sound is. So yeah, I'm just rambling now, although I guess that's kind of the point. So yeah. Yeah, but I don't know. I guess I could talk about this book a little bit. So, if you don't know, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I mean, we're about 20 minutes away from like starting this, but it is by far my favorite book. It's by Douglas Adams, who is a great comedy writer, and I want to get to the first chapter, and there's actually a really good introduction, and I might just start the introduction right now. Yeah, let's just start the introduction, and then I might talk more about it later. So, yeah. So, but this book is there's a lot of them, which contains The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Restaurant and the End of the Universe, Life, the Universe and Everything, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, and Young Zaphod Plays It Safe. There is one more book that I did not finish that is not part of this compilation, and that is Mostly Harmless, but it's, yeah. A movie was made of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the like mid 2000s. Douglas Adams actually died partway through its production. Actually, yeah. And it never actually gained that lot of praise. And I think in terms of just like movie adaptations, like it was actually very faithful to the first book. Like they changed some stuff to like make it work as its own self-contained movie, but honestly, it was actually very faithful to the feel and style, and I thought it was really good, and I rather enjoyed that adaptation of it. And I kind of want to go watch it now, but I'm not going to. I'll probably do that after the stream. So let us begin this nice little time. Okay. Introduction. Let's put this pillow on me so I actually. Oh, no. Let's do this. And yeah, I also saw in the theaters. Because, yeah. Okay. Let's bring us a little bit closer. Hey there. How's it going? Oh, thank you. Welcome, welcome. Okay. Introduction. A guide to the guide. Some unhelpful remarks from the author. The history of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is now so complicated that every time I tell it, I contradict myself, and whenever I do get it right, I'm misquoted. So the publication of this omnibus edition seems like a good opportunity to set the record straight, or at least firmly crooked. Anything that is put down wrong here is, as far as I'm concerned, wrong for good. The idea for the title first cropped up when I was lying and drunk in a field in Innsbruck, Austria, in 1971. Not particularly drunk, just the sort of drunk when you have a couple stiff gossers after not having eaten for 2 days straight on account of being a penniless hitchhiker. We're talking of a mild inability to stand up. I was traveling with a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe by Ken Walsh, a very battered copy that I borrowed from someone. In fact, since this was 1971, and I still have the book, it must have counted as stolen by now. I don't have a copy of the Europe on $5 a day, as it then was, because I wasn't in that sort of financial language. Night was beginning to fall on my field as it spun lazily underneath me. I was wondering where I could go that was cheaper than Innsbruck, resolved less, and didn't do the sort of things to me that Innsbruck had done to me that afternoon. What had happened was this. I had been walking through the town trying to find a particular address. When, being thoroughly lost, I stopped to ask for directions from a man on the street. I knew this mustn't be easy because I don't speak German, but I still was surprised to discover how much difficulty I was having communicating with this particular man. Gradually, the truth dawned on me as we struggled in vain to understand each other, that of all the people in Innsbruck I could have stopped to ask, the one I had picked did not speak English, did not speak French, and was also deaf and dumb. With a series of sincerely apologetic hand movements, I disentangled myself, and a few minutes later, on another street, I stopped and asked another man, who also turned out to be deaf and dumb, which was when I was brought the beers. I ventured back onto the street. I tried again. When the third man I spoke to turned out to be deaf and dumb and also blind, I began to feel a terrible weight settling on my shoulders. Whenever I looked at the trees and the buildings wherever I looked, the trees and buildings took on dark and menacing aspects. I pulled my coat tightly around me and hurried lurching down the street, whipped up by a sudden gusting wind. I bumped into someone and stammered an apology, but he was deaf and dumb and unable to understand me. The sky lowered. The pavement seemed to tip and spin. If I hadn't happened to duck down a side street and pass a hotel where a convention for the deaf was being held, there was every chance that my mind would have cracked completely, and I would have spent the rest of my life writing the sort of books for which Kafka became famous and dribbling. As it is, I went to lie in a field, along with my Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe, and when the stars came out, it occurred to me that if only someone would write A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as well, then I, for one, would be off like a shot. Having this thought, I promptly fell asleep and forgot about it for about 6 years. I went to Cambridge University. I took a number of baths and a degree in English. I worried a lot about girls and what had happened to my bike. Later became a writer and worked on a lot of things that were almost incredibly successful, but in fact just failed to see the light of day. Other writers will know what I mean. My pet project was to write something that would combine comedy and science fiction, and it was this obsession that drove me into deep debt and despair. No one was interested, except finally one man, a BBC radio producer named Simon Brett, who had the same idea, comedy and science fiction. Although Simon only produced the first episode before leaving to BBC to concentrate on his own writing, he is best known in the United States for his excellent Charles Paris detective novels. I owe him an immense debt of gratitude. For simply getting the things to happen in the first place. He was succeeded by the legendary Gregory Perkins. In its original form, the show was going to be rather different. I was feeling a little disgruntled with the world at the time and put together about 6 different plots, each of which ended with the destruction of the world in a different way, and for a different reason. It was called The Ends of the Earth. While I was filling the details of the first plot, in which Earth was demolished to make way for a new hyperspace express route, I realized that I needed to have someone from another planet to tell the reader what was going on, to give the story the context I needed. So I had to work out who he was and what he was doing on Earth. I decided to call him Ford Prefect. This was a joke that missed American audiences entirely, of course, since they never heard of the rather oddly named little car, and many thought it was a typing error for perfect, as I just mispronounced. I explained in the text that the minimal research my alien character had done before arriving on this planet had led him to think that the name would be nicely inconspicuous. He'd simply mistaken the dominant life form. So, how would such a mistake arise? I remember I used to hitchhike through Europe, and would also find the information or advice that came my way was out of date or misleading in some way. Most of it, of course, just came from the stories of other people's travel experiences. At this point, the title, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, suddenly popped back into my mind from wherever it had been hiding all this time. Ford, I decided, would be a researcher who collected data for the guide. As soon as I started to develop this particular notion, it moved inexorably to the center of the story, and the rest, as the creator of the original Ford Prefect would say, is bunk. The story grew in the most convoluted way, as many people will be surprised to learn. Writing episodically meant that I would finish one episode. I had no idea what the next one would contain. When, in the twists and turns of the plot, some event suddenly seemed to illuminate things that had gone before, I was as surprised as anyone else. I think that the BBC's attitude towards the show while it was in production was very similar to that which the Macbeth had towards murdering people. Initial doubts, followed by cautious enthusiasm, and then greater and greater alarm at the sheer scale of the undertaking, with still no end in sight. Reports that Jeffrey and the sound engineers were buried in a subterranean studio for weeks on end, taking as long to produce a single sound effect as other people took to produce an entire series, and stealing out everyone else's studio time in which to do so, were all vigorously denied, but absolutely true. The budget of the series escalated to the point that it could have been practically paid for by a few seconds of Dallas if the show hadn't worked. The first episode went out on BBC Radio 4 at 10:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, March 8th, 1978. On a huge blaze of no publicity at all. Bats heard it, the whole old dog barked. Odd dog barked. After a couple weeks, a letter or two trickled in. So, someone out there had listened. People I talked to seemed to like Marvin the paranoid android, whom I had written as a one-scene joke, and only developed further at Jeffrey's insistence. Then some publishers became interested. I was commissioned by Pan Books in England to write up the series in book form. After a lot of procrastination and hiding and inventing excuses and having baths, I managed to get about 2/3 of it done. At this point, they said, very pleasantly and politely, they had already passed 10 deadlines, so would just please finish the page I was on and let them have the damn thing. Meanwhile, I was busy trying to write another series, and was also writing the script and editing the TV series Doctor Who, because while it was very pleasant to have your own radio series, especially one that somebody had written in to say they heard, it didn't exactly buy you lunch. So that was more or less the situation when the book The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was published in England in September 1979 and appeared on the Sunday Times mass market bestseller list at number 1 and just stayed there. Clearly, someone had been listening. This is where things start to get complicated, and this is what I was asked in writing this introduction to explain. The guide has appeared in so many forms: books, radio, a television series, records, and soon to be a major motion picture, each time with a different storyline that even its most acute followers have become baffled at times. Here is a breakdown of the different versions, not including the various stage versions, which haven't been seen in the States and only complicate the matter further. The radio series began in England in March 1978. The first series consisted of 6 programs, or FITs as they were called. FITs 1 through 6. Easy. Later that year, one more episode was recorded and broadcast, commonly known as the Christmas episode. It contained no reference of any kind to Christmas. It was called the Christmas episode because it was the first broadcast on December 24th, which is not Christmas Day. After this, things began to get increasingly complicated. In the fall of 1979, the first Hitchhiker book was published in England, called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was substantially expanded the version of the first 4 episodes of the radio series, in which some of the characters behaved in entirely different ways, and others behaved in exactly the same ways, but for entirely different reasons, which amounts to the same thing, but saves rewriting the dialogue. At roughly the same time, a double record album was released, which was, by contrast, a slightly contracted version of the first 4 episodes of the radio series. These were not the recordings that were originally broadcast, but wholly new recordings of substantially the same scripts. This was done because we had used music off gramophone records as incidental music for the series, which is fine in radio, but it makes commercial release impossible. In January 1980, 5 new episodes of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy were broadcast on BBC Radio, all in 1 week, bringing the total number to 12 episodes. In the fall of 1980, the second Hitchhiker book was published in England about the same time as that Harmony Books published the first book in the United States. It was very substantially reworked, re-edited, and contracted versions of episodes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 5, and 6, in that order, of the radio series, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In that case, in case that seems too straightforward, the book was called The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, because it included the material from episode 5 of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was set in the restaurant called the Milliways, otherwise known as The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. At roughly the same time, a second record album was made featuring heavily rewritten and expanded versions of episodes 5 and 6 of the radio series. This record album was also called The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Meanwhile, a series of 6 television episodes of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was made by BBC and broadcast in January 1981. This was based, more or less, on the first 6 episodes of the radio series. In other words, incorporated most of the book of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and the second half of the book of The Restaurant in the Universe. Therefore, they would follow the same basic structure of the radio series and incorporated the revisions from the book, which didn't. In January 1982, Harmony Books published The Restaurant in the Universe in the United States. In the summer of 1982, a third Hitchhiker's book was published simultaneously in England and the United States, called Life, the Universe, and Everything. This was not based on anything that had been heard or seen on radio or television. In fact, it flatly contradicted episodes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of the radio series. These episodes of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you will remember, had already been incorporated in the revised form of the book called The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. At this point, I went to America to write a film screenplay, which was completely inconsistent with most of what had gone on so far, and since then, that film has been delayed in the making. A rumor that it currently has been that filming will. Rumor currently has it that its filming will start shortly before The Last Trump. I wrote the 4th and last book in the trilogy. So long, and thanks for all the fish. This was published in Britain and the USA in the fall of 1984, and it effectively contradicted everything to date, up to including itself. As if this were not enough, I wrote a computer game for Infocom called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which bore only fleeting resemblances to anything that had previously gone under the title, and in collaboration with Jeffrey Perkins, assembled The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the original radio scripts, published in England and the US in 1985. Now, this was an interesting venture. This book is, as the title suggests, a collection of all the radio scripts as broadcast, and it is therefore the only example of one Hitchhiker publication accurately and consistently reflecting another. I feel a little uncomfortable with this, which is why the introduction to the book was written after the final and definitive one you are reading now, and of course, flatly contradicts it. People are often asking me how they can leave the planet, so I prepared some brief notes. 1. Phone NASA. Their phone number is 713-483-31111. Explain that it is very important that you get away as soon as possible. 2. If they do not cooperate, phone any friend you might have in the White House, 202-456-1414, to have a word on your behalf with the guys at NASA. 3. If you don't have any friends at the White House, phone the Kremlin. Ask the overseas operator for 0107 095 295 9051. They don't have any friends there either, at least none to speak of, but they do seem to have a little influence, so you might as well try. If that fails, phone the Pope for guidance. His telephone number is 011-396-6982, and I gather his switchboard is infallible. 5. If all these attempts fail, flag down the passing flying saucer and explain that it is vitally important that you get away before your phone bill arrives. Douglas Adams. And that was the introduction, which brings us nicely to midnight, which is time for the first chapter. And just in time for a plane to be flying overhead. All right. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Lily's favorite book. For Johnny Brock and Claire Gorst and all the other Arlingtonians for tea, sympathy, and a sofa. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 98 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think that digital watches are a pretty neat idea. The planet has, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people were living out were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper, which is odd because on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were all unhappy. And so the problem remained. Lots of people were mean, most of them were miserable, and even the ones with digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place, and some said that even the trees had been a bad move, and no one should have ever left the oceans. Then, one Tuesday, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice for people to a change, a girl sitting on her own in a small cafe in Rickmansworth suddenly realized what it was that had been going on wrong all this time. And she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time, it was right. It would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, however, before she could get a phone to tell anyone about it, a terrible, stupid catastrophe occurred, and the idea was lost forever. This is not her story, but it is the story of that terrible, stupid catastrophe and some of its consequences. It is also the story of a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It is not an Earth book, never published on Earth, and until the terrible catastrophe occurred, never seen or heard of by any Earthman. Nevertheless, a wholly remarkable book. In fact, it was probably the most remarkable book to ever come out of the great publishing corporations of Ursa Minor, of which no Earthman has ever heard of either. Not only is it a wholly remarkable book, but also a highly successful one, more popular than Celestial Home Care Omnibus, better selling than 53 More Things to Do in Zero Gravity, and more controversial than Ulan Kuflapit's trilogy of philosophical blockbusters, Where God Went Wrong, some more of God's greatest mistakes, and Who is this God person anyway? In many of the more relaxed civilizations on the outer eastern rim of the galaxy, the Hitchhiker's Guide has already supplanted the great Encyclopedia Galactica as the standard repository for all knowledge and wisdom. Though it has many omissions and contains much that is apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate, it scours for the older, more pedestrian work in two important respects. First, it is slightly cheaper, and second, it has the words "Don't Panic" inscribed in large, friendly letters on its cover. But the story of this terrible, stupid Thursday, the story of its extraordinary consequences, and the story of how these consequences are inextricably intertwined with the remarkable books begins very simply. It begins with a house. Chapter 1. The house stood on a slight rise just on the edge of the village. It stood on its own and looked out over a broad spread of West Country farmland. Not a remarkable house by any means. It was about 30 years old, squattish, squarish, made of brick, and had 4 windows set in the front side in a proportion which was more or less exactly failed to please the eye. The only person for whom the house was in any way special was Arthur Dent, and that was only because it happened to be the one he lived in. He had lived in it for about 3 years, ever since he moved out of London, because it made him nervous and irritable. He was about 30 as well, now tall, dark-haired, and never quite at ease with himself. The thing that used to worry him most was the fact that people always used to ask him what he was looking so worried about. He worked in local radio, which he always used to tell his friends was a lot more interesting than they probably thought. It was, too. Most of his friends worked in advertising. On Wednesday night, it had rained very heavily, and the lane was wet and muddy, but the Thursday morning sun was bright and clear as it shone in Arthur Dent's house for what was to be the last time. It hadn't properly registered yet with Arthur that the council wanted to knock it down and build a bypass instead. At about 8 o'clock Thursday morning, Arthur didn't feel very good. He woke up bleary, got up, and wandered blearily around his room, opened a window, saw a bulldozer, found his slippers, and stomped off to the bathroom to wash. Toothpaste on the brush, so scrub. Shaving mirror pointing at the ceiling. He adjusted it. For a moment reflected a second bulldozer through the bathroom window. Properly adjusted, reflected Arthur's dense bristles. He shaved them off, washed, dried, and stomped off to the kitchen to find something pleasant to put in his mouth. Kettle, plug, fridge, milk, coffee, yawn. The word bulldozer wandered through his mind for a moment in search of something to connect with. The bulldozer outside his kitchen window was quite a big one. He stared at it. Yellow, he thought, and stomped off back to his bedroom to get dressed. Passing the bathroom, he stopped to drink a large glass of water and another. He began to suspect that he was hungover. Why was he hungover? Had he been drinking the night before? He supposed he must have. He caught a glint in the shaving mirror. Yellow, he thought, and stomped on to the bedroom. He stood and thought. The pub, he thought. Oh dear, the pub. He vaguely remembered being angry about something that seemed important. He'd been telling people about it at great length, he rather suspected. His clearest visual recollection was of glazed looks on other people's faces. Something about a new bypass he'd just found out about. It had been in the pipeline for months, only no one seemed to have known about it. Ridiculous. He took a swig of water. It would sort itself out, he decided. No one wanted a bypass. The council didn't have a leg to stand on. It would sort itself out. God, what a terrible hangover it had earned him, though. He looked outside himself in the wardrobe mirror. He stuck out his tongue. Yellow, he thought. The word yellow wandered through his mind in search of something to connect with. 15 seconds later, he was out of the house and lying in front of a big yellow bulldozer that was advancing up his garden path. Mr. L. Prosser was, as they say, only human. In other words, he was carbon-based bipedal life form descended from an ape. More specifically, he was 40, fat, shapely, and worked for the local council. Curiously enough, he didn't know it, he was also a direct male line descendant of Genghis Khan, and through intervening generations and racial mixing had so jungles his genes that he had no discernible Mongoloid characteristics, and the only vestiges left in Mr. L. Prosser with his mighty ancestry was a pronounced stoutness about his tongue and a predilection for little fur hats. He was, by no means, a great warrior. In fact, he was a nervous, worried man. Today he was particularly nervous and worried because something had gone seriously wrong with his job, which was to see Arthur Dent's house got cleared out of the way before the day was out. "Come off it, Mr. Dent," he said. "You can't win, you know. You can't lie in front of the bulldozer indefinitely." He tried to make his eyes blaze fiercely, but they just wouldn't do it. Arthur lay in the mud and squelched at him. "I'm game," he said. "We'll see who rests first." "I'm afraid you're just going to have to accept it," said Mr. Prosser, gripping his fur hat and rolling it around on top of his head. "This bypass has got to be built, and it is going to be built." "First I've heard of," said Arthur. "Why's it got to be built?" Mr. Prosser shook his finger at him, and then stopped and put it away. "What do you mean, why is it got to be built?" he said. "It's a bypass. You've got to build bypasses." Bypasses are devices that allow some people to dash from point A to point B very quickly, while other people dash from point B to point A very fast. People living at point C, being a point directly between, are often given to wonder what's so great about point A that so many people in point B are keen to get there, and what's so great about point B that so many people from point A are so keen to get there. They often wish that people would just once and for all work out where the hell they wanted to be. Mr. Prosser wanted to be at point D, Point D wasn't anywhere in particular. It was just a convenient point a very long way from points A, B, and C. He would have a nice little cottage at Point D, with axes over the door, and spend a pleasant amount of time at Point E, which would be the nearest pub to Point D. His wife, of course, wanted climbing roses, but he wanted axes. He didn't know why. He just liked axes. He flushed hotly under the derisive grins of the bulldoze drivers. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, but it was equally uncomfortable on his each. Obviously, someone had been appallingly incompetent, and hoped to God it wasn't him. Mr. Prosser said, "You were quite entitled to make any suggestions or protests at the appropriate time, you know." Appropriate time? Hooted Arthur. Appropriate time? The first I heard about it was when a workman arrived at my home yesterday. I had to ask him if he'd come to clean the windows, and he said no. He'd come to demolish the house. He didn't tell me straight away, of course. Oh, no. First he wiped a couple of windows and changed me a $5. Then he told me. "But, Mr. Dent, the plans have been available at the local planning office for the last 9 months. "Oh, yes. Well, as soon as I heard, I went straight round to see them. Yesterday afternoon. You hadn't exactly gone out of your way to call attention to them, have you? I mean, like actually telling anyone or anything. But the plans were on display. On display? I eventually had to go down to a cellar to find them. That's the display department, with a flashlight. Well, the lights had probably gone out. Had probably gone. So had the stairs. Well, but look, you found the notice, didn't you?" "Yes," said Arthur. "Yes, I did. It was on display at the bottom of a locked filing cabinet, stuck in a disused laboratory, with a sign on the door saying, 'Beware of the leopard.'" A cloud passed overhead. It cast a shadow over Arthur Dent as he lied propped up on his elbow in the cold mud. It cast a shadow over Arthur Dent's house. Mr. Prosser frowned at it. "It's not like it's a particularly nice house," he said. "I'm sorry, but I happen to like it." "You'll like the bypass." "Oh, shut up," said Arthur Dent. "Shut up and go away, and take your bloody bypass with you. You hadn't got a leg to stand on, and you know it." Mr. Prosser's mouth opened and closed a couple of times, while his mind was for a moment filled with inexplicable but terribly attractive visions of Arthur Dent being consumed with fire, and Arthur himself running screaming from the blazing ruin with at least 3 hefty spears protruding from his back. Mr. Prosser was often bothered with visions like these. They made him feel very nervous. He stuttered for a moment, and then pulled himself together. "Mr. Dent," he said. "Yes? Hello?" said Arthur. "Some factual information for you. Have you any idea how much damage this bulldozer would suffer if I just let it roll straight over you?" How much?" said Arthur. "None at all," said Mr. Prosser, and stormed nervously off, wondering why his brain was filled with 1,000 fiery horsemen all shouting at him. By a curious coincidence, none at all is exactly how much suspicion the ape-descendant Arthur Dent that one of his closest friends was not descended from an ape, but was, in fact, from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse, and not from Guildford, as he usually claimed. Arthur Dent had never, ever suspected this. This friend of his had first arrived on the planet Earth some 15 Earth years previously, and he'd worked hard to blend himself in with Earth society, from which, with it as it must be said, some success. For instance, he'd spent those 15 years pretending to be an out-of-work actor, which was plausible enough. He had made the one careless blunder, though, because he had skimped a bit on his preparatory research. The information he had gathered had led him to choose the name Ford Prefect as being nicely inconspicuous. He was not conspicuously tall. His features were striking, but not conspicuously handsome. His hair was wiry and gingerish, and brushed backward from his temples. His skin seemed to be pulled backwards from his nose. There was something very slightly odd about him, but it was difficult to say what it was. Perhaps it was that his eyes didn't seem to blink often enough, and when you talked to him for any length of your time, your eyes began involuntarily to water in his behalf. Perhaps it was the way he smiled a little slightly too broadly and gave people the unnerving impression that he was about to go for their neck. He struck most of his friends he ever made on Earth as an eccentric, but a heartless one. An unruly boozer with some oddish habits. For instance, he would often gate-crash university parties, get badly drunk, and start making fun of any astrophysicist he could find till he got thrown out. Sometimes he would get seized of oddly distracted moods and stare into the sky if hypnotized until someone asked him what he was doing. Then he would start guiltily for a moment, relax, and grin. "Oh, just looking for some flying saucers," he would joke, and everyone would laugh and ask him what sort of flying saucers he was looking for. "Green ones," he would reply with a wicked grin, laughing wildly for a moment, and then suddenly lunge for the nearest bar and buy an enormous round of drinks. Evenings like this, it usually ended badly. Ford would get out of his skull on whiskey, huddle in a corner with some girl, and explain to her in slurred phrases that, honestly, the color of flying saucers didn't matter that much, really. Thereafter, staggering semi-paralytic down the night streets, he would often ask passing policemen if they knew the way to Beetlejuice. The policeman would usually say something like, "Don't you think that it's about time you went off home, sir?" "Oh, baby, I'm trying to, is what Ford invariably replied on these occasions. In fact, what he was really looking for when he stared distractedly into the sky was any kind of flying saucer at all. The reason he said green was that green was the traditional space livery of the Beetlejuice Trading Scouts. Ford Prefect was desperate to find that any flying saucer at all would arrive soon, because 15 years was a long time to get stranded anywhere, particularly somewhere as mind-bogglingly dull as Earth. Ford wished that a flying saucer would arrive soon, because he knew how to flag flying saucers down and get lifts from them. He also knew how to see the marvels of the universe for less than 30 Altarian dollars a day. In fact, Ford Prefect was a roving researcher for that wholly remarkable book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Human beings are great adapters, and by lunchtime life in the environs of Arthur's house had settled into a steady routine. It was Arthur's accepted role to lie squelching in the mud and make occasional demands to see his lawyer, his mother, or a good book. It was Mr. Prosser's accepted role to tackle Arthur with the occasional new ploy, such as "for the public good" talk, or the March of Progress talk, or the "they knocked my house down once, never looked back" talk, and various other conjectures and threats. And it was the bull driver's accepted role to sit around drinking coffee and experimenting with union regulations to see how they would turn the situation to their financial advantage. The Earth moved slowly in its diurnal course. The sun was beginning to dry out the mud that Arthur lay in. A shadow moved across him again. "Hello, Arthur," said the shadow. Arthur looked up, squinting into the sun, and was startled to see Ford Prefect standing above him. "Ford! Hello, how are you?" "Fine," said Ford. "Look, are you busy?" Am I busy?" exclaimed Arthur. "Well, I just got all these bulldozers, and I have things to lie in front of, because they'll just knock down my house if I don't. But other than that, no, not especially." "Why?" They don't have sarcasm on Beetlejuice, and Ford Prefect often failed to notice it unless he was concentrating. He said, "Good. Is there anywhere we can talk?" What?" said Arthur Dent. For a few seconds, Ford seemed to ignore him, and stared fixedly into the sky like a rabbit trying to get run over by a car. Then suddenly he squatted down beside Arthur. "We've got to talk. And drink." "Fine," said Arthur. "Talk." "It is vitally important that we talk and drink. Now, we'll go to the pub in the village." He looked into the sky again. nervous, expectant. Look, don't you understand? Shouted Arthur. He pointed at Prosser. That man wants to knock down my house. Ford glanced at him, puzzled. Well, they can't do it while you're away, can't he? He asked. He can do it while you're away, can't he? He asked. But I don't want them to. Ah. Look, what's the matter with you, Ford? Said Arthur. Nothing. Nothing's the matter. Listen to me. I've got to tell you the most important thing you've ever heard. I've got to tell you now, and I've got to tell you in the saloon of the bar of the Horse and Groom. But why? Because you're going to need a very stiff drink. Ford stared at Arthur, and Arthur was astonished to find his will beginning to weaken. He hadn't realized that this was because of an old drinking game that Ford learned to play in hyperspace ports that served the Mandranite mining belts in the system of Orion Beta. The game was not unlike Earth game called Indian Wrestling. It was played like this. 2 contestants would sit on either side of the table, with a glass in front of each of them. Between them would be placed a bottle of Jank's spirit, immortalized in the ancient Orion mining song. Oh, don't give me none more of that old jank spirit. No, don't give me none more of that old jank spirit, for my head will fly, my tongue will lie, and my eyes will fry, and I may die. Won't you pour me one more of that sinful old jank spirit? Each of those 2 contestants would then concentrate their will on the bottle and attempt to tip it and pour spirits in the glass of the opponent, and who would then have to drink it. The bottle would then be refilled, and the game would be played again and again. Once you started to lose, you'd probably keep losing, because one of the effects of the jank spirit is to deeply suppress telepsychic power. As soon as the predetermined quantity had been consumed, the final loser would have to perform a forfeit, which was usually obscenely biological. Ford Prefect usually played to lose. Ford stared at Arthur, who began to think that perhaps he did want to go to the House and Groom after all. But what about my house? He asked plaintively. Ford looked across to Mr. Prosser, and suddenly a wicked thought struck him. He wants to knock your house down? Yes, he wants to build, and he can't because you're lying in front of his bulldozer. Yes, and? Yes, and? I'm sure we can come to an agreement, said Ford. Excuse me, he shouted. Mr. Prosser was arguing the spokesman for the bulldozer drivers about whether or not Arthur Dent constituted a mental health hazard, and how much they should get paid if he did, looked round. He was surprised and slightly alarmed to see that Arthur had company. Yes, hello, he called. Has Mr. Dent come to his senses yet? Can we, for a moment, called Ford, assume that he hasn't? Well, sighed Mr. Prosser. And can we also assume, said Ford, that he's going to be staying here all day? So all your men are going to be standing around all day long doing nothing? Could be. Well, if you're resigned to doing that anyway, you don't actually need him lie here all the time, do you? What? You don't, said Ford patiently, actually need him here. Mr. Prosser thought about this. Well, no, not as such, he said. Not exactly need. Night. Prosser was worried. He thought that one of them wasn't making a lot of sense. Ford said, So, if you just like to take it as read that he's actually here, then he and I could slip off to the pub for half an hour. How does that sound? Mr. Prosser thought it sounded perfectly potty. That sounds perfectly reasonable, he said in a reassuring tone of voice, wondering who he was trying to reassure. And if you want to pop off for a quick one yourself later on, said Ford, we can always cover you in return. Thank you very much, said Mr. Prosser, who now no longer knew how to play this at all. Thank you very, very much. Yes, that's very kind. He frowned, and then smiled, and then tried to do both at once, failed, grasped hold of his fur hat, and rolled it fitfully round top of his head. You can only assume that he had just won. So, continued Ford Prefect, you would just like to come over here and lie down? What? Said Mr. Prosser. Ah, I'm sorry, said Ford. Perhaps I didn't make myself fully clear. Somebody's got to lie in front of the bulldozers, haven't they? Or there wouldn't be anything to stop them driving into Mr. Dun's house, would there? What? Said Mr. Prosser again. It's very simple, said Ford. My client, Mr. Dent, says that he will stop lying here in the mud in the sole condition that you come and take over for him. What are you on about? Said Arthur, but Ford nudged him with his shoe to be quiet. You want me, said Prosser, spelling out his new thoughts to himself, to come over there and lie there? Yes. In front of the bulldozer? Yes. Instead of Mr. Dent? Yes. In the mud. In, as you say, the mud. As soon as Mr. Prosser realized that he was substantially the loser after all, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, this was more like the world as he knew it, he sighed. In which your return, you will take Mr. Dent with you down to the pub. That's it, said Mr. Ford. That's it, exactly. Mr. Prosser took a few nervous steps forward. Promise, he said. Promise, said Ford. He turned to Arthur. Come on, he said to them. Let's get up and let the man lie down. Arthur stood up, feeling as though he was in a dream. Ford beckoned to Prosser, who sadly, awkwardly sat down in the mud. He felt that his whole life had been some sort of dream, and he sometimes wondered whose it was, and whether they were enjoying it. The mud folded itself round his bottom, his arms, and oozed into his shoes. Ford looked at him severely. And no sneakily knocking down Mr. Dent's house while he's away after all right, he said. The mere thought, growled Mr. Prosser. Hadn't even begun to speculate, he continued, settling himself back, about the merest possibility of crossing my mind. He saw the bulldoze drivers' union representative approaching and let his head sink back and close his eyes. He was trying to marshal his arguments for proving that he did not constitute a mental health hazard himself. He was far from certain about this. His mind seemed full of noises, horses, smoke, and the stench of blood. This always happened when he felt miserable or put upon, and he had never been able to explain it to himself. In a high dimension of which we know nothing, the mighty Khan bellowed with rage, but Mr. Prosser only trembled slightly and whimpered. He began to feel little pricks of water behind his eyelids. Bureaucratic cock-ups, angry men lying in mud, indecipherable strangers handing out inexplicable humiliation, and an unidentified army of horsemen laughing at him in his head. What a day! What a day! Ford Prefect knew that it didn't matter a pair of dingoes' kidneys whether Arthur's house got knocked down or not now. Arthur remained very worried. But can we trust him? Maybe myself I'd trust him to the end of the earth, said Ford. Oh, yes, said Arthur. And how far is that? Oh, about 12 minutes away, said Ford. Come on, I need a drink. And, there we go. That's, chapter 1 of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah. No, I think this could this could probably be about, move to, like, a wrap-up time here, but, yeah, I actually think that, like, works out as, like, a good amount of time for we'll get through, like, a chapter a day, maybe 2 if they're short chapters, but, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and, like I said, like, if you have any, like, suggestions for, like, I don't know, because, like, I don't know, segments of, like, these Friday night streams, which, I mean, I enjoy doing this one, and I'd love to do them in the future and kind of make it a more, regular thing, so, yeah. Well, as always, I hope you all have a wonderful night's sleep. I hope you all have wonderful dreams, and stay safe if you're in a place like me with lots of snow. I'm pretty sure I heard, like, a whole, like, heap of snow fall off my roof, because it just, like, is gathering up so much right now, and, yeah. Well, I hope you sleep well, and as always, may your story smile upon you.